There's something magical about a clematis in full bloom, whether it's climbing a trellis, spilling over a fence, or bursting with color around your mailbox. But what if yours is just a little underwhelming? Stringy growth, tiny flowers, just a general meh feeling. Well, if you want to grow beautiful clematis, watch today's video. We're going to talk about the how and the why, and we're going to plant up 3 beautiful clematis in my own garden. So welcome to Gardening TLC. I am Michelle and I live in Northern Illinois, Zone 5. So if you're ready, let's dig right in. What does the clematis really want? Well, they can be a little particular, but once you give them everything that they need, they are star performers in your garden. So have you ever heard the saying, sun on my face, shade on my feet? Well, that's classic for a clematis. They need 6 or more hours of sun on their face, on the flowers, on the leaves, so that they can be productive and grow. But they want their roots to be cool, so we want to shade the bottom of them. How do I do that? Well, you can do that by underplanting things underneath your clematis. The other thing is they want good drainage. Clematis hate wet feet, so if you can improve that soil and that drainage, you absolutely need to do it. You also need to have a little patience with the clematis. There's that old garden saying, you know, first year sleeps, second year creeps, third year leaps. I would say that's classically true of clematis. First, let's talk about why your flowers might be falling flat. Why aren't you getting big flowers? Well, first, check your variety and make sure that they meet the expectation of the size of the flowers that you're looking for. Some clematis just automatically have smaller flowers. Also, if you're not giving it that 6 hours of sun, it's not getting enough sunlight, then it can't be productive to create all those big, beautiful blooms that you're looking for. Also, if you are a fertilizing maniac, you might be giving it too much nitrogen. And too much nitrogen might produce this big, lush, beautiful vine, but it's not producing flowers. So look for a phosphorus-based fertilizer to put on your clematis in the spring. You also want to have consistent moisture on your clematis, especially that first year when you're growing it. So once you put it in the ground, you probably have to go out there and water it 2 and 3 times a week to get it going. And then once it gets established after that first year, then you're probably going to be okay with just going through regular rain, or maybe watering it once a week if you go through a period of time where you're not having any rain. But consistent moisture is the key for these. We have these growing up trellises at the garden center, and we supplement water them maybe once a week if it's not raining outside, and they're just absolutely gorgeous. Now you know what they need, but the biggest question I get asked when anybody wants to know about clematis is, how do I know when to prune it? That is the tricky part, especially if you don't know what kind of clematis you have. Clematis actually fall into 3 groups. There's group 1, which bloom on old wood, and you prune those right after they're done blooming. Now, I prefer not to grow any that are group 1 because I think they're a little bit harder to take care of because they bloom on old wood. If you cut them all the way back to the ground, you're kind of like in that every other year cycle, so you lose some of your blooms. So basically with those, you're just giving them a trim to shape them up. Then there's group 2. Group 2 bloom on old wood and new wood. So you're going to actually get 2 sets of blooms out of a group 2. Group 2 are going to grow. They're going to bloom in the spring. You can give them a little haircut or not when they're done blooming, but giving them the haircut actually allows them to produce more flowers later because their energy is going towards producing the flowers versus a seed head. But then again, in early fall, they'll bloom again for you. Now you can give them another little trim after that, but these can also be cut back to the ground if you feel like you want to control the size, or they're getting sloppy looking, or maybe a lot of branches in them broke and they're not looking great. So actually you can prune it to the ground. You'll sacrifice your spring blooms, but while it's growing through the summer, you'll get that second flush later in the fall. The last group is group 3, and I think group 3 are the easiest by far to grow. So if you can grow a group 3, it will make your life easy because they all bloom on new wood, which means every year you're going to cut them back 12 to 18 inches from the ground, pull all of the dead foliage off, and get rid of it and start fresh every single year. So I think group 3, especially if you're a beginner, are probably the easiest ones to grow. Now I have 3 beautiful clematis that I want to put in today in my own garden. Now is actually the perfect time to buy a clematis because they're probably on sale. At least everyone at my store is on sale because we've cut them back. We have cleaned any of the tangled foliage up on it, and they look kind of puny. But the root system on it is fabulous, and that's really what you're going for right now. We don't care when we buy plants on sale whether or not we get flowers this year. We care whether or not we get a great big beautiful root system to support our plant next year. Now, if I get flowers this year, it's going to be a nice little bonus. The other thing is, in some parts of the country right now, it's really hot. So you might want to wait to plant them, but still get them. They're on sale. Keep them in the shade and keep them watered, because that's what the garden centers are doing. They're keeping them watered. They're keeping them in the shade, and then they're selling them to you as you buy them. Any plant is going to be happier in the ground, though, than it is in one of these 1-gallon pots or bigger. So we are going to be planting up 3 clematis here at my house. And the first one that we're going to plant is the easy one in group 3. And this is a Jack Monte. So the Jack Monte, and I'm going to put the specs up and a picture right here so that you guys can see what this looks like in full bloom, is this beautiful dark purple. And it is going to grow 8 to 12 feet high. So not a really big clematis. It might seem like it's really big, but 12 feet really isn't that big. So if I was going to grow this on an arch, I would actually use 2, one on either side, so that they grow up and they meet in the middle and maybe intermingle. You can also interplant 2 clematis together, but if you're going to do that, I would highly recommend that they're both group 3 or both group 2. So that way your pruning is the same for each of them. Now, I always want mine to meet in the middle. That's why I would plant one on either side. But you can certainly just grow this up a trellis as well, or an obelisk, which I'm going to be growing one on a trellis, one on an obelisk, and the third one I'm still deciding where it's going to go. So Jack Monte actually gets a really big flower. It's like a 5 to 6 inch flower, and it has this really dark, deep purple that kind of is velvety looking. I really like it. It really is a star. The plant itself actually produces tons of flowers. Whenever I have this growing on the trellis over at the garden center, I better have them in stock for sale. And when it's still blooming and I've sold out, people are so disappointed, and I always feel bad. I feel like I never, no matter how many I order enough. Most clematis grow in zone 4 through 9, so I like that it's got a good winter hardiness to it. The other thing is you want to make sure that you mulch around the base of that clematis. So that will help cool the roots down. Underplanting will help cool the roots down if you can do that. Plant something small underneath it and push that mulch up around the base during the winter to protect it. If you're in a zone 4 or 5 or even 6, that way you know that you've protected the roots on the plant. I think that you can cut it back in the fall, or you can cut it back in the spring. I don't know. I guess it depends on what works for you as far as all your cleanup goes. Now, I have heavy clay everywhere in my yard except for beds that I've amended. So in a couple places, we are definitely going to have to backfill the holes with compost. The next clematis that I'm going to plant is a Niobe right here. This is a ruby red with 6 to 8 inch flowers on it. Now this is a group 2. So group 2 is going to bloom a little bit earlier in the year, and then you can give it the little haircut, take it through to the beginning of fall, and it'll bloom again for you. Oh, and if I didn't say the group 3, they bloom later in the summer. So it kind of is nice that you would have a spring bloomer and then have a summer bloomer, because then you've got 2 cycles of beautiful clematis growing in your garden. The flowers on the Niobe are like this really deep red. It has a yellow stamen in the center, and I like them because they're non-fading. I have grown this one before in other places that I've lived, and I absolutely love it. So I can't wait to put this one in. The last clematis that I'm going to plant is a clematis viticella called Betty Corning. This has more of an upside down bell-shaped flower on it, and it's very delicate, very pretty. And they are actually a larger clematis, growing anywhere from 5 to 6 feet fairly quickly. So it's a pretty fast grower. And the leaf structure on it is a little bit different as well. You can see it's got that smaller leaf on it. But because it's such a big, thick clematis, I wanted to make sure that it was a zone 3, because this is one of those ones that I don't want to have to trim through, because I think it's going to get pretty thick pretty fast. And so I want to be able to just cut this back from the ground and pull all the foliage off, because this one is going to go in the back garden on my obelisk. I knew that when I got this one, that that's where it was going to go. See, and if you find some right, like see right here how it's got some dead in it right there, all you have to do is just go in there and you can pull it out, but it's actually better if you go in and find where it ends and clip it out. All right, let's go plant the clematis. Oh, the other thing to remember when you're doing the clematis is don't use fresh manures. That's too rich. Compost is better for your backfilling. The other thing too is, let's say you don't even know what kind of clematis you have. You bought it, you put it in, and you don't know. Well, then just wait to prune it and see what it does. Use process of elimination to go backwards based on what we just talked about to figure out which one you have. Now, sometimes the tag will say group 2, group 3. Sometimes they don't. In fact, I'd say more times than not, the tag doesn't tell you what group they're in. I had to Google all 3 of these to find out what group they were in. And you can do that too. You want to make sure that you've got a decent support for your clematis, depending on which one it is. Now, this Betty Corning that I'm going to be planting needs a sturdier trellis. So we are going to be planting it on this obelisk right here. So in this garden, we have a bobo hydrangea right here. They are starting to bud up. It's one of the later blooming paniculata hydrangeas. So this one here blooms white and then it turns like a mauve pink. And then over here, I do have 3 red knockout roses. These are the Radico knockouts. And then I will be putting in a tiny quick fire right back there. So I think I'm going to plant this right at the base of this obelisk. So in you go. He's going to go right there. Now I will help it get going, but for the most part, this kind of a clematis, it will grab on. I'll come out once a week and make sure that they're not trailing along the ground and maybe help it along if I need to. But I think this thing will grow up this thing, no problem. I do like that I'm putting a group 3 on here because I like the idea of being able to see this obelisk in the winter. And this way I can cut this one back to the ground every fall. I am going to plant the Jackmani or the purple right here on a trellis right there on the big red shed. I should start calling it the she shed. So, because it's just easier to say than big red shed. So we're going to be planting this on the she shed. The door's right there, and so we're just going to put it right here. And we'll have that beautiful dark purple contrasting against the red. And then we've got this beautiful wine and roses Woodgilla in front of it that blooms a pretty fuchsia. Now remember, this one blooms later in the season, so I'm not going to be competing purple against fuchsia. It will just be this beautiful purple when I need something blooming over here. And then look at our zinnias, you guys. They're starting to come into their own. Love it. I've decided to use 2 skinny trellises and I just hammered those into the ground. And I don't have to amend this bed because remember earlier in the year, we put cardboard down, we topped it with compost and then mulch. I said I wasn't going to plant anything, but this is just a little clematis. So I'll probably have to cut a hole through the cardboard to be able to get this up the trellis. Or not up the trellis, but in the ground. And then I'll just wrap it around the trellis a little bit and then it'll get going. So I had these in the garage already. And so I'm like, you know what? I need to use those. They're pretty. I like them. But you know, once you start to grow the clematis, you don't really see the trellis. So yeah, I think this one's going to be perfect. Look at my castor beans. Aren't they awesome? Oh my goodness. I love those. But here is where I've decided that I'm going to be putting this other clematis, and I'm going to put this one on a shorter obelisk. So it's going to go about right here. Now, right now I have a coleus in here. It's just an annual. So once it's done this year, it probably won't be there next year. This plant right here is our Sugar Tina Summer Sweet, and it's going to fill in this area right here. This gets pruned every year, and so it won't get much bigger. And my oak leaf hydrangea will get about this big. So I want something like right there. And I think the white flowers on this oak leaf hydrangea and then the white flowers on the Sugar Tina and then the red flowers up against the elderberry, I think it's going to look good. So this is where we've decided that we're going to put it. It might not last there long term because over time I do have this prairie fire crab, but it's going to take that thing, 7-8 years to get big. So right now it's going to get everything it needs. One, this is really good soil up here because I dumped compost, so it drains well because it's behind the wall. And 2, it's going to get enough sun on its face and shade on its feet. All right, so for today, for the next couple years, I'm going to put it right there. Let me go get the obelisk. I think I like it right there. Now, I like obelisks that are all one piece and there's not like wing nuts to put them together. So this obelisk is by Panacea. And it is a 72-inch rose tower. It's in black, but we're not using it as a rose tower. We're going to use it for the clematis. I like that we'll be able to still see some of this obelisk or rose tower or whatever you want to call it after the flowers grow. I like that it's black so that the red will show up against it. So yeah, I also like that. Look at how long those legs are on there. See, I can really get that in the ground. All right, that's where we're going to put it, right there. Maybe I'll go over just a little bit this way. Here is our Betty Corning. We started to wrap it up the obelisk and it'll keep going. And as we're doing tours, I'll show it to you. Gonna get that watered in real fast. I did put a little bit of fresh mulch on the top. I didn't feel like there was enough on the bottom. See, it's already in the sun. All right, let's go look at where the other two landed. All right, our Niobe landed right there on our obelisk. And I'm thinking I'm loving where that is. And I think that's gonna fill in really super nice. So I do like that. And if you're wondering what this green cord is that you see everywhere, it's the extension cord that's going over to the she shed. I just haven't buried it yet. All right, and then let's look at the last one, the Jackmani. All right, our Jackmani is right back here. And right now, yes, it is in the shade, but it's morning time and the sun hasn't come up over the top of the shed yet. So this will be in sun by probably 10 o'clock, and then it'll be in sun pretty much all day. All right, so there it is right there. That's the puniest of them, but you know what? Sometimes the puny ones are the ones that do the best. All right, because they don't have that old foliage on there and they're just starting fresh. All right, I'm pretty happy. Now you know what to do to grow great clematis. Hopefully this video helped you and gave you some tips and some information that will help you grow these big, beautiful blooms. I can't wait till next year for mine to grow. So go look for one right now. They're probably on sale at all the garden centers. Don't forget, Garden Gab is this Saturday. We'll be answering questions in the garden about the garden. And if you want to be in on the viewer submission Garden Gab, which will be later in the month, make sure you send your pictures in. I can't show them if you don't send them. Turn your phone sideways. Send it to the email address right there. And we will share those pictures during Garden Gab. Now, some of you are sending pictures in. I love it. But I got to know who you are, where you live, what we're looking at, and what zone it is. All right, so that's all I've got for today, you guys. Have a wonderful rest of your day. I hope you get your hands in the dirt today. I'm Michelle, and we'll see you later. Bye, everyone.